Welcome to DIY guitar making at Eric Schaefer Guitars. Today we're going to explore a very subtle design feature of most acoustic guitars. So this video topic comes from a viewer question that I received from a Paul Gragier. I think that's how you say your last name, Paul. And Paul writes, I bought a Larrivee L03 guitar about 3 years ago. I love it. The tone, response, and playability are superb. I take great care with it and rarely leave it to rest in or on anything other than a stand or lying in its case. Perhaps that's why I never noticed one of its design aspects before. Recently, I left the guitar momentarily laying on a flat counter surface. It was then that I noticed that the sides of the guitar are tapered. Well, not tapered in the sense of two parallel lines converging, more like a slight curvature or bend along the line of the back at the waist. I'm hardly an expert on acoustic guitar architecture, but I can't recall ever seeing a design aspect like this before. So I'm curious, is this feature common to other guitar designs? Now, first, what I want to address is the fact that what you're noticing, Paul, is actually two separate design aspects that, when combined, give the impression of that slight curve starting at the back at the waist, like you described it. But these two design aspects sort of have their own separate purposes. There's the radii of the plates, and then there's the body depth taper. I'm going to explain this by drawing this out. The first thing to understand is that the top plate and the back plate both have their own separate convex radius. So let's go ahead and draw this guitar out on the whiteboard here. I'm going to be drawing it out in profile, so it's going to be like this, kind of like it's, jumping out of the whiteboard. So this particular guitar, I know I'm building with a 30-foot radius on the top and a 12-foot radius on the back. By the way, the larger number, 30, actually means a flatter radius. The 12 is going to be your very domed radius, and that's why that is on the back. Paul, you noticed that the back had a radius, and that's common. Most people can notice the back radius, but it's very hard to notice the top radius because it's so slight. But if you take a straight edge and place it on that Larrivee guitar that you have, you're going to notice that even the top has a radius as well. It's just much, much smaller than the radius, or smaller isn't the correct way of describing it because it's a larger number. It's much more flat than the radius of the back, so you don't really notice it. Okay, so here is our profile here, and this is the top. There's the back. And here we're going to have the tail block and the neck block right there. Let's go ahead and draw the fretboard and even the bridge, just to sort of make the point that, because you might be wondering, why have a larger radius or a flatter surface, right? Because the larger the radius, the flatter that surface is. Why have a flatter surface on one side and more of a curvature on the other? And that's simply for practical reasons, because you have to glue the bridge and the fretboard tongue down to the top. So just practically speaking, you really can't get away with having an extreme radius on there without having a lot of difficulty in dealing with those parts. But with the back, we don't have those concerns. So we're able to add a much greater curvature there. The purpose for the radii on the plates is primarily structural. You need to have at least some kind of radius, even if it's a very flat radius like a 40-foot or even a 50-foot radius. You need to have at least some radius, otherwise you run into some serious structural problems. Beyond that, there are acoustic reasons as well, but I don't want to get sidetracked into talking about the radii, because the real point of this video is the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is that body depth taper. So now that we've designed the radii into our kind of childish looking guitar here, we're going to go ahead and add the body depth taper, and that's simply done, at least in the case of my guitars, by changing the heights of the two blocks. You have your neck block and your tail block. This one is 90 millimeters, and I'm going to go ahead and draw the neck there so it looks a little better, sort of. And this one is 100 millimeters. So that slight difference there. Now if we apply our 12-foot radius to that, we're basically setting our radius, and I'm going to, even though it's only a 10 millimeter difference, I'm going to exaggerate it so you can see it better, just to make the point. So all I'm doing now is tilting this 12-foot radius. I'm not changing the radius at all. I'm just tilting it so that it rests on the higher tail block and the lower neck block. And now you can see this probably looks a lot like what you were describing with your Larrivee guitar. I'm glad Paul brought up this question because I don't think a lot of builders really think about why they put a taper from tail block to neck block. They just do. It's what early makers like Antonio de Torres did, so we just follow suit. And I'm including myself in this because it's not something I think about that deeply. The main reason, and I think most builders who think about it even a little bit agree on this, the only reason that is sort of inarguable is the ergonomic reason. So, of course, a thinner-bodied acoustic guitar just feels a little more comfortable than a fat-bodied acoustic guitar. And since the lower bout is far more important when it comes to the projection and sustain, basically the output of the guitar system, the lower bout is far more important than what happens in the upper bout. So we can set our dimensions how we want them at 100 millimeters here for the tail block, and then we can get away with tapering it to make it a little more comfortable. Your leg goes right here, and so this is the part of the guitar that you feel against your body, more or less, and back here is the part of the guitar that you hear more or less. Now, the ergonomic reason alone is enough reason for me personally to taper the bodies. But on top of that, I do think there is some merit to thinking about this acoustically, because our sound hole is somewhere around here, and I do think that a body that tapers towards the sound hole can more efficiently move the excited molecules from the plates towards the sound hole. It just seems to make sense that tapering towards the sound hole would be a more efficient system, especially when you consider the Bernoulli Principle and, well, as it relates to the Venturi Effect, which, if you don't know the Bernoulli Principle, as it relates to the Venturi Effect, really just describes any fluid, like water or air, as it moves through a constriction, like you see here. At the constriction, these molecules are going to speed up. Here and here, the molecules are going to slow down. So, I think there's something to that effect when you consider that the design of a guitar body constricts towards the sound hole, which is the exit point. Now, I'm not a physicist with a PhD or anything like that, so really my understanding of the taper, as far as the acoustic principles that you could maybe apply to that, it only goes that far. Because the plates are exciting the air molecules in here, and they're basically playing off of each other. You can see these arrows pointing up and down at the plates. You can imagine the plates that are flexible and resonating against each other. I don't know how that effect really applies then when you consider them moving in this direction towards the sound hole. I just think there must be some way that this constriction, even though the plates are playing against each other in this way, is going to force the molecules towards the sound hole a little bit more efficiently. And again, it's not something that I've thought about to an enormous extent, but I have thought about it a little bit. I think ergonomically, it makes a lot of sense. And then the acoustic principle behind it that I just laid out here, which is incomplete for me, I think has some merit and is worth at least considering. Now, the guitar makers who originated the concept of tapering the body depth towards the sound hole are long dead, of course. So, and what's interesting is I don't know that anybody really recorded what they were thinking as far as why they were doing that. I think this is one of those things that is just, it's part of the early design concepts, but it's sort of lost to history as to why they designed it that way to begin with. So we can only speculate by looking back at what they've done and looking at science and physics and trying to decide for ourselves, oh, maybe they did it for this reason. And I could be totally wrong about this. I looked it up a little bit. Maybe somebody, if you could point it out to me, there is a scholarly article or something like that out there that actually has the sort of recorded intent of this design concept, but it seems to me like it's just one of those things that the builders used to do, and likely for ergonomic reasons, but potentially also for some sound acoustic principles as well. I'd love to hear what you guys think about that, and if you have any other information or even just your own speculations and theories on that body depth taper, I'd love to hear it. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video every Friday. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.